Welcome to Dune Chapter by Chapter. I'm Dominic. So in the last video I did, last chapter I talked about, Paul and Jessica had to kind of prove themselves to the Fremen. They got surrounded, and Stilgar had decided that he would take Paul into the tribe, but he wouldn't take Jessica. And so Jessica and Paul picked up on this, and Jessica had to prove herself to the Fremen. Because where Arrakis is such a harsh environment, the Fremen have a very strict, almost like brutal code of living. And basically that code is you have to have some purpose to the tribe. You have to be able to give something to the tribe that proves you're worth much more than just your weight in water. And so Jessica did that by subduing Stilgar, who was the strongest Fremen there, and she did it using the Weirding Way, which is a Bene Gesserit fighting style. And so now this is the aftermath of that one, this next chapter. So the chapter starts off, they're moving through the desert, and they're getting undercover because it's soon going to be daylight. And that's how they are. They travel during the night because it's safer and it's cooler, the sun isn't out. And then they stay down low during the day to avoid Harkonnen patrols and things like that. And so as they're moving through the desert, Paul kind of noticed they have almost like more guerrilla tactics, the Fremen. And this triggers a memory of his father saying that, you know, if the House Atreides had to go rogue, they could become a guerrilla house. So the Fremen are, you know, they have like a guerrilla style of warfare. And that's how they've always gone after the Harkonnens or anyone else that has exploited or oppressed them. And so now, an interesting conversation between Stilgar and Lady Jessica. So Stilgar has some concerns that there's some talk amongst the men that Lady Jessica might actually call Stilgar out and challenge him for leadership of the tribe. And since she's already beat him once in physical combat, she might try to do it again, try to usurp his leadership. So this is causing some unrest among the Fremen in the troop. And so Stilgar brings us up, and the other thing that's causing some unrest is Jessica is very physically attractive. And, you know, a lot of these Fremen guys are looking for wives and so on. So Stilgar starts talking options of basically how to subdue any of this unrest before it gets too out of hand. And then he tells her, I mean, if you do challenge me in combat and you do win, it doesn't make any difference. The Fremen are not going to follow you because you're not wise in the ways of the desert. So basically telling her, if you're tempted to take me on, you can beat me, but it won't actually do you any good. And then Jessica says, well, no, I had no intention of doing that. And then he suggests that maybe, you know, he asks her if she's married and tells her there's a lot of, you know, Fremen that would like a wife like her. You know, she's very physically alluring and things like that. And almost subtly, not so subtly, implies that he could be a husband for her, or somebody could. And also suggests that that could be a way for her to subdue any of the unrest that's been stirred up amongst the rest of the Fremen by her joining the tribe. And she asks outright, and he says, well, technically, no, I'm not asking you to marry me, but I'm just putting out these options. And he said, not that I would want to, but it might also send out the wrong signal that to the other Fremen that, you know, I'm too busy with all these different women because I have other wives, that I'm not going to be in the right headspace to be a leader. So anyway, he throws out another option for her, and then she starts thinking, oh, there's another option. And the other option is they have a Reverend Mother that is very old and will soon be passing on. And, you know, she'd have to be judged by Shai Hulud to take the place of the current Reverend Mother that they have. And so now he kind of eyes her up. He's kind of waiting for a sign, for Jessica to do something or say something that will justify the prophecy that was implanted among the Fremen many, many, many years ago by the Missionaria Protectiva that was headed up by the Bene Gesserit. And so she's thinking about all the different things she can do. So she confirms it, and so she gives off the right signal that yes, we're the ones, me and my son are the ones that was foretold in the prophecy. And then she's even amazed at how deep this planting of this religion is amongst the Fremen, that they even refer to the Bene Gesserit that's hiding with them, that's implanted in there, as Reverend Mother. And so she's amazed at how well the Missionaria Protectiva did in sowing in all the seeds. And so basically, if a Bene Gesserit was caught on this planet, they could ease their way into the population. And that was the whole point of it. That was what it was meant to do. And so anyway, she contemplates the idea that she could possibly take over as the Reverend Mother, and then that would be a position she could have, and then there would be none of this wondering if she was going to call out Stilgar or anything like that. So it's an interesting conversation that they have amongst themselves, and it really shows off that Stilgar is a leader that really likes to process all the information and really weigh all the outcomes of a decision. And that's even mentioned in the chapter. And then there's that nice quote there that Stilgar gives, good leadership, a good leader is what separates a people from a mob. A mob doesn't have a leader, a people does. So I always like that line from the book. And then we switch over to Paul. Now, Paul in this chapter, he's getting exposed to a lot of spice here on Arrakis. And so he's with Chani, and she decides, she gives him some food. And it's basically some kind of bird meat that's mixed in with some kind of oats or something and honey that he eats. But it's got a lot of spice in there too. A very, very potent spice. So he eats it, and it's a lot more spice than he's used to consuming, he's ever been exposed to before. And so it triggers his prescience. And it's a very interesting thing in this chapter when it happens. The way it's described, it's almost like he can see an infinite number of possible futures all at once. And it happens so strongly, the effect that it actually is crippling. It completely demoralizes him, and he almost can't function, because as he's looking, every movement he makes, every little brush of sand or anything he kicks around or any kind of movement he makes, he can see all these different futures branching off from every action that he takes, no matter how subtle an action. And so it's overwhelming to his senses. So that's the interesting thing about this, is his prescience. He can see into the future, but he can see all these other possible futures, but he doesn't know which one. And what's interesting is now he's entered a blind spot again, because this happened earlier in the book where he kind of came across a blind spot where his prescience couldn't tell him what was going to happen next. And then it kind of became, this ability to see into the future became a double-edged sword for him, because he was starting to rely on it too much, that when he was caught in a situation where he couldn't use it, he felt almost impaired or something. He was gotten too used to having that ability, that power. So that's what's happening in this chapter. He sees these infinite number of realities that he doesn't even know which one to pick. There's so many of them. It's like his consciousness has just exploded with this overload of spice. And this is another thing that I don't know if this will be included in the film, but it would be cool to see how Denis Villeneuve would actually represent this on screen. I mean, they describe it in the book as all these waves of future possibilities shooting out before him and all that, but I'd like to see how you would visually represent that in a big screen, on the big screen, in a big budget movie, how the filmmaker Denis Villeneuve would actually pull that one off, and how it would work on the big screen if he includes this particular scene in the film, which I kind of hope he does, because it is actually a pretty cool scene when you read this chapter. And then the chapter kind of ends with a cliffhanger. And Paul sees all these different possibilities, and one possibility he sees is his own death. He sees himself bleeding out, dead on the ground from a vicious knife wound. And that's where the chapter ends. So he sees all these possible futures, and some of them don't have good outcomes. And that's an interesting thing that you'd have to think about if you had the ability to actually see into the future. And so while I'm discussing these chapters, some people kind of reminded me in the comment section, because I kind of get carried away and I jump ahead in the book, that there are people that it's their first time reading the book, and as they're following along with these videos I do of each chapter of the book. So I'm going to try to not jump ahead and try not to spoil anything. I kind of take it for granted that everyone who's watching the channel has already read Dune, but I know for some of you it's your first time reading the book. So I'm going to take that into consideration moving forward. I'm not going to try to jump ahead and spoil anything that goes on further in the book. But it's interesting to see where this cliffhanger is going to lead for the next chapter, with Paul dead on the ground, that possible future that he sees. So interesting stuff that's going on, and the story's really moving forward. And I never realized all the other times I've read Dune is what a large chunk of the book is actually taken up by Paul and Jessica's journey in the desert. So I mean, we're very, very deep into the book now, and they've just hooked up with the Fremen. They've been on the run for quite a while, so it does take up quite a big chunk of the book, which I never realized that until I really got into this reading and been like kind of picking apart each chapter as I go along. So that's everything I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I will see you at the next one.